Welcome back. Is this the beginning of the end? At least the Sri Lankan government thinks so. They say they have cornered the LTTE and the conflict will end. But is it that simple and straightforward? The LTTE has strong international support from the Tamil diaspora, and it is expected that these links will not be entirely severed. Many believe that some may try and regroup in South India. It is also thought that the suicide bombings will not end. Earlier this month, explosives were found being smuggled into the capital despite tight security. On the political front, President Mahinda Rajapakse has gained in popularity from the recent events. With us are our guests in Toronto, Rajan Philips, in Washington DC, Patrick Mendis, and in London, Charu, Lata, Hogg. Mr. Patrick Mendis, let's start talking about the possible scenarios now in Sri Lanka. What happens if the government succeeds in trouncing the LTTE? Is this going to be a huge achievement?
I think we have to look back what happened in the past few days, and they claimed they killed more than 500 Tamil terrorists. The question is, during that time period, the civilian trapped in these areas were forcefully recruited by threatening their families, especially women and girls, and their men went to training camp for short-term training and got armed, went to the front line of fighting. And during this kind of situation, terror tactics is the one that government did not anticipate. And as a result, more than 500 people were killed. These kind of terrorist tactics, I think, will continue. As earlier suggested, this has to come from a political side to find some kind of negotiated settlement. In the military term, until these other issues are resolved, military, one form or another, terrorism would continue. As we seen in the suburb of Colombo, in Jayala, there is another politician who was killed yesterday.
Right.
And you can see this kind of situation will continue unless we really address the real issues that started this whole conflict many years ago.
Okay, you're saying that there will remain some real issues irrespective of whether this is going to be over. But let me go to Charu, Lata, Hogg. My question is, an end to the civil war, is this going to provide the government with more leverage to start social development programs, prosperity, because the country for the last 4 decades was almost standstill just because of this situation?
Well, this government came to power on a populist agenda. It also came to power on a militarist agenda. So if you're talking about social development, the government does not have the finances to engage in infrastructural and social development. It has already gone to the IMF for a bailout. So essentially, the government's military strategy has completely depleted the government's resources. Also, it has a pending investigation into its human rights record by the EU, and it stands to lose. If that investigation succeeds, it stands to lose a special preferential tariff in terms of textiles, which are its primary exports. So, and in a global economic recession, it is not clear how the government is going to generate the finances and how it's going to bolster the economy to really put its country back on track in terms of social development.
But at least, and let me go now to Rajan Philips, the international community has pledged some money for the Sri Lankan government to rebuild the north and the east of the country. How significant is this?
I think that would be significant, but as others have said, the real problem in Sri Lanka, the war has been a terrible distraction from the other areas of governance. In fact, the economy is in virtual tatters, every aspect of the economy, every sector of the economy, and the state administration is also in shambles. And it would be very difficult for the government to pull itself out of the mess that it has created. And also, it's practically the only country in the region which is not bothered about the global recession and depression that everybody is concerned about. It would be a huge challenge just on the morrow of a military victory to embark on an economic development program.
Okay.
I am not so pessimistic.
You're saying are you so pessimistic about the future?
Well, what I'm saying is I'm not, there is nothing to suggest that we could be optimistic about flourishing development immediately after the military victory if other things remain the same.
Mr. Patrick, this is a situation which resembles back the 80s, where the LTTE survived many setbacks when many thought it was going to be finished off. Do you think that they have the possibility to go underground and restart a new guerrilla war against the government?
I think that's going to be more challenging for them to do that one, because if you look at it, this is not the military victory per se that we are winning this terrorism. There is also international component to it, and in the many Western democratic countries, they ban the LTT, and they also restrict the funneling of money to the war. And when it's stopped, and there is a greater upper hand for the government to crush the terrorism in the country. At the same way that the international element is very important reconstruction effort. You know, war can be won, but the question is, can we win the peace? In order to do that one, the same way they got the international help, they need to ask not only from the multinational corporation, but the diaspora, both in a Sinhalese and also Tamil population, to ask them to come back to the country and a rebuilding effort in order to resolve this issue.
We haven't talked so far about the India factor, and let me talk to Charu about this. What happened, Charu, if the Tamil rebels move to Tamil Nadu in India, where they have huge support, and the area puts more pressure on the Indian government? Are we going to see the same scenario like back in the 87 when the Indians had to interfere because of the pressure from the Tamils?
Despite the domestic constituency in India, the Tamil domestic constituency in South India, the Indian government has no appetite to get involved in Sri Lankan affairs. And also in terms of, you know, movement of the Tamil cadre, the LTT cadre that you're talking about, if the leadership moves to Tamil Nadu, that is we are assuming that the Sri Lankan government will A, let them flee, and B, the Indian government will allow them to enter their territory. Both sides, both the main dominant political parties in South India, the DMK and the AIDMK, have to pledge a certain amount of support for the Tamil population in Sri Lanka because of their political constituencies. But would they be willing to stick their necks out and to put pressure on the central government to actually get involved in negotiations, in political negotiations, or in a military intervention? That is highly unlikely.
All right, Mr. Rajan Philips, even if this is going to be a possibility, the government wiping out the Tamils, this is going to be seen by the government as a huge victory, but then we will have still a silent majority in the Tamil-controlled areas. Aren't you with those who think that the problem in Sri Lanka is basically because the Sinhalese, historically speaking, haven't been willing to grant the Tamils more access to power?
In a political sense, yes. I would introduce one qualification. In a social and cultural sense, it would be difficult to suggest that there are fundamental differences between the Sinhalese, the Tamils, and the Muslims. The differences are purely and totally a political problem, and that has spilled over into social and cultural areas. But so in the sense that what you are saying appears to be the position of some influential sections in the government. There are others who do not agree with that line, but so far from what we are able to see, their influence and powers are limited. So till that changes, nothing will change. And even though the LTT and the Tamils may be highly weakened in Sri Lanka, the center of gravity of Tamil politics is also shifting outside Sri Lanka, where a good number of Tamils, the far-flung diaspora, reside. And their considerations and their protests will have to be taken into account by the government.
Absolutely, a very complex reality. Indeed, we'll have to wait for the days to come to see whether this is going to be the beginning of the end for the Tamil Tigers, as the government alleges. In Toronto, Mr. Rajan Philips. In Washington, DC, Patrick Mendis. And in London, Charu, Lata, Hogg. We have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Goodbye for now.